Amidst this week's tragic mayhem, one news story has slipped under the radar that could have profound implications for American citizens. I'm talking about the House passing CISPA, the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act. Yes, this is the same bill that was first introduced back in November of 2011. And while it passed in the House then, it was prevented from being passed in the Senate. It was a huge victory at the time for civil liberties activists who claimed that the bill was an infringement on privacy. It would open the door for tech corporations to share private data with the government. Less than a year later, everyone thought CISPA was dead and buried, yet it's reared its ugly head again. Just yesterday, CISPA overwhelmingly passed in the House and now awaits a Senate vote. But this time around, the government's prepared to address any concerns regarding the legislation. A myth and facts sheet they provided says, quote, "The bill has nothing to do with government surveillance. Rather, it simply provides narrow authority to share anonymous cyber threat information between the government and the private sector so they can protect their networks and their customers' private information." So, is this really the case? And what are the implications if CISPA does pass? To cut through all the rhetoric, I'm joined now by Michelle Richardson, Legislative Counsel at the ACLU's Washington Legislative Office. Hi, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, Michelle, you just wrote a great article breaking down kind of through the rhetoric. The newest version of CISPA supposedly received several amendments in closed-door sessions. I was hoping that you could break down some of these that you wrote about. What is the civilian control of domestic cyber programs?
Well, one of the biggest problems with CISPA is that it creates an exception to all of the privacy laws on the books right now, so that companies that hold incredibly sensitive information, like internet records, can share it with other companies or directly with the government. It's written so broadly, though, that they can go directly to military agencies like the NSA and allow them to collect information on Americans. And we have a very strong wall here in the United States between our civilian and our military, and we don't let the military act against Americans on U.S. soil. It's rooted in our very founding of our country. And so this is a very dangerous bill because it allows the military to start collecting information on Americans.
And something that I forgot to say was that these are actually the main problems with the bill that you have outlined, the amendments that weren't fixed yet for the bill to move forward. What about the limit sharing of personal information?
Another issue with the bill is that it doesn't say that companies need to extract the personal information before they share the rest with each other or with the government. And the idea here is that these companies may come across technical data that they can share that won't affect our privacy. Some people call it the ones and zeros, but they really mean the technical data that doesn't reflect you as a person and can't be tied to you and your activities. So we hope that as this bill moves forward, they amend it to make it very explicit that that personal data shouldn't be shared in the process of this program.
And they incorporate post-collection protections on information. What does that mean?
Yes, this is the idea that after it's shared, there has to be back-end protections on the information, so it's not misused for other purposes, that this doesn't become a Fourth Amendment backdoor. And there were some amendments accepted, both in the committee and on the floor of the House this week, that substantially address that problem.
Well, that's good to hear. So as CISPA stands right now, the government can search through the information so long as it's for an authorized purpose. What do they deem an authorized purpose?
Well, there is the cybersecurity purpose, but there are unrelated things now in the bill, like crimes against minors, or anything that can cause harm to a human being. So that can be incredibly broad, and we're very concerned that that will allow the government to troll through all of this data looking for evidence of crimes that right now they have to get subpoenas or warrants to access.
And is it physical harm or any sort of harm? I guess that's open for interpretation.
It's open for interpretation. It's not defined in the statute, but we are concerned that it could include all sorts of activity that, while serious, is just another crime, and it needs to go through the criminal process with all the attendant protections that includes.
Good point. Let's talk about what corporations are supporting CISPA right now. AT&T, Comcast, Time Warner, pretty much all the big wigs of the telecom industry. What stake do they have in this bill?
The whole bill is set up as liability protection for the companies so that neither the government nor their customers can hold them accountable. No one can take them to court, they can't be prosecuted, and there's just no recourse for someone if their information is shared. So this is an absolute win for them. They have no responsibilities, they don't have to meet any standards, and in return they get a free-for-all. And they can share whatever they want, and they can take almost any sort of action in response and be completely indemnified indemnified and not be held accountable.
Win-win for them. And I think a lot of people who fought CISPA the first time around are thinking, oh my gosh, how is this coming back around, rearing its ugly head? We just beat this. And I think a lot of what had to do with SOPA not passing was Google, Wikipedia, I mean, staging these online protests that we saw that really helped galvanize this opposition to the bill. Without that blackout from big web giants, will we see enough of a unified opposition to defeat this?
That's a good question, and the companies haven't mobilized against this. This is really just a win-win for them, so they've supported this all the way. What we do have working for civil liberties right now is, one, the Obama administration. They did issue a veto threat this week, and it very explicitly said they want civilian control over the domestic internet. They want personal information protected. They want to make sure companies don't get just a free pass to do whatever they want with this data. So that is a very strong card to have in your pocket. And it's very rare to see the administration issue a veto threat on the basis of privacy. The other thing we have going for us is that the Senate last Congress took a much more targeted approach and included many more privacy protections. So hopefully those forces joining together, along with advocates and people working on the internet, can make sure that the final product isn't a violation of civil liberties.
Well, of course, there's so many more representatives in the House and the Senate, like you just said last time, they were very staunchly opposed without these amendments. So unless these amendments are changed, should we or could we expect the Senate to block it again? I guess we can only hope.
Yeah, I think right now it's unlikely that it will have much traction in the Senate. So now we're really looking at the long game here and what happens over the next year. We understand that the Senate is working on its own bill, and we're really encouraging them to start where they left off last Congress with some pretty substantial protections in place. What happens in the long term when they go to conference and work out their differences is a bigger question, and it's going to take a lot of work from the advocacy community and citizens letting their Congress know what they want.
Well, this bill definitely isn't going away. We know that the administration is very fervently trying to pass through some sort of cybersecurity legislation, and we just got to galvanize to really ensure that these privacy amendments are instilled. I mean, how likely is it, though, that if it did, let's just say hypothetically it did pass the Senate, how likely is it that Obama will veto the bill? I mean, we've heard this kind of rhetoric before where he said he'd veto the controversial NDAA amendment on the National Defense Authorization Act, and he didn't do that.
Right. Well, right now, I think we have every reason to believe that they would follow through on it. This is something that's been vetted through different agencies and at the highest levels, and I know it wasn't issued lightly, but I guess we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. And the question is, if it's CISPA light or CISPA with just a couple of tweaks, what happens then?
Yeah, and we can't wait around till, to expect that. We have to prevent this before it gets to that point. But really quickly, we have about 30 seconds left. But why do you think that's been so underreported in the media? And I mean, basically, it's been passed through the same week that there's two major tragedies being covered, virtually no media coverage.
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer. This is a big threat to privacy, probably bigger than the Patriot Act or FISA or some of these other expansions that we've seen. And but thanks to you and some of the other reporters, that's just finally getting some coverage.
All right, well, let's keep pushing it through. Thank you so much, Michelle Richardson, legal counsel at the ACLU.